starting the. So hello again, and it's great to meet all of you tonight. And we're having really great guests, Christopher Ames and Carolyn Shelby. Let me tell a very short story of how we got acquainted. When we were with Alena Yenka in Portland, Chris and Carolyn helped us a lot, but we would have never recognized the level of how funny and how humorous they are until they took us to a short trip to the falls. And as Lena has put it, that was the longest listening activity in my life. Because we were just exchanging so much, there was not only fun, but the level of I can't put it into words, but the level of conversation, it probably was the only one in my life, and it's only because
you need to meet more people.
Yeah, of course, because now I'm mostly in Ukraine, but yeah, so the level of this conversation was so great stylistically and in terms of fun, metaphors, everything.
Because what she's not mentioning is that we took Marina and her friend to the falls here, which we hadn't seen for several years, and there was a horrible fire between the last time we had been there and when we took Marina, and it was like horrible. And so we were like saying great beautiful falls, and then we got there, it was like, oh my god.
But the falls didn't burn. The falls were fine.
It was all the blackened area around there.
Oh, I think they had a good time, or they were lying really well.
Oh, no, we really had a good time, but that conversation, ever since we started the series of these tips from writers, from professional writers, I kept thinking of you. And this is really a great chance to meet two professional screenwriters. Just imagine people who worked as screenwriters professionally. And I won't tell you a story. You need to tell the story by yourself. So okay. I'm giving the virtual floor to you. Thank you for being with us tonight. Please.
Well, first of all, thank you for asking us, Marina. I love talking to people about in the Ukraine. I love talking about Ukraine. I love everybody. I will marry every one of you here who's a woman and a man will discuss. The first thing you should know, and this is like most important thing we will tell you, is that there was a writer in Hollywood who was very successful, and you might have seen some of his movies. He wrote The Princess Bride, he wrote All the President's Men, he wrote Marathon Man, he wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. His name was William Goldman. And William Goldman wrote a book in which his major point was, talking about Hollywood, nobody knows anything. So you should, however long we spend with you here, just keep repeating that phrase in your mind so that you know that anything we're telling you is personal experience, personal opinion. And if you come back later to me and say you were wrong about this, I'll say, yes, I understand. So anyway, to give you a little bit of background, we wrote together for 25 years professionally and a bit more than that unprofessionally. Well, there are those who would say we wrote unprofessionally all our lives, but that's the thing about writing for movies. There's so many people involved. Everybody knows your job better than you do because everybody uses words. And so you get notes and notes and notes and notes. We wrote a movie called Class Action, which starred Gene Hackman and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. And we went through 25 drafts.
25 drafts.
25 drafts over 4 years. and finally got to the point where they shot it pretty much as we wrote it, and that was great. We also wrote a movie called Def Leppard, otherwise known as Hysteria, which was the story of the Def Leppard rock band. And we wrote for a number of TV series. The one that you might have a little bit of familiarity with is Growing Pains. And then, as I said in my note to Marina, we wrote 527,644 scripts that we got paid for but never got made. And
which is the norm.
yeah, that's the reality of Hollywood. So that's what happens. I gave the title of this presentation we're doing as Very Good, Very Bad Guys, because I'm going to talk a little bit about villains, but we can talk about whatever you want to, and I'm much more interested in your questions than my answers. The one thing I'll say about villains when you're writing them is, and every single actor you will ever meet will tell you the same thing, it is so much more pleasant and professionally rewarding to play a bad guy than it is to play a good guy, because good guys are, by their very definition, good. They're plain. They're potatoes followed by more potatoes with a side order of potatoes. Whereas if you're playing a villain, you can go crazy and you can access all those parts of you that normal human beings are ashamed of, and you put it right up there. So when you're acting or when you're writing, the further out you can go with your villains, the better. I mean, if you've ever seen a James Bond movie, you understand how creative the villains are in that, and James Bond is always kind of just James Bond. So I would say that and I'll dismiss this pretty quickly because I just had to come up with a title, but if you want to talk about villains, we can. I will just say that they are more fun to write, and the temptation is to spend more time with them when you're writing a script than with the good guy, which for the audience is not great because, you know, they're enjoying watching the evil, but then again, there's a limit to that. What do you want to talk about?
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, while she thinks about what she wants to talk about, I will say that it's if you do this professionally, it is, as I think Victor Hugo said, the best of times and the worst of times. The highs are unbelievably high, and the lows, which unfortunately are much more than the highs, are unbelievably unhappy.
I will say that I think that perseverance, the kind of perseverance you people are living every single day, is very helpful if in your writing.
Yeah, I should think that the first time you write something professionally and someone comes back to you and says, this is the worst thing I've ever read, most writers in America would be crushed and would go on a drinking binge for a week after that. For people like you, I think it's just, oh yeah, next.
Yeah.
I've been through worse. I can deal with a little bit of criticism.
Yeah. There is not winning a popularity contest. You need one person to say yes.
That's really important. It's, if you're writing professionally, it is, to use an old cliche, it's a game of numbers. It's like selling anything. You can hear 1,000 no's, and if you hear one yes, that's all it takes to make your living for that month or maybe your career.
However, if you hear the same no and an explanation that's kind, then it's wise to look at, gee, maybe there's something here. Maybe this character needs more, whatever it is that they're saying.
See, that's the problem with, I always kind of stop when I hear someone say, he came from nothing and he made the big gamble and now he's the king of the world. Well, what about all the stories of people who came from nothing and made the big gamble and utterly failed, you know, which is like 99.9% of the people out there. So to summarize that part, I remember points in my life where I just didn't think I could possibly be happier, and other points where I didn't think I could be any more unhappy. you put yourself out there when you write something. It's like raising a child and sending them to kindergarten, and they come home in the first day and tell you, my teacher said I'm an idiot and I'm ugly too. It's like, how do I deal with that? And like with anything in professionally in entertainment, you have to develop a very thick skin, which I must say I never did. And it hurt every time I got rejected. I guess it hurts everybody every time they get rejected, but it it's something where you put your maybe a year or two of your life into something and you put it out there and somebody reads the first 10, literally reads the first 10 pages and goes, I don't like this, and
Yeah.
tosses it aside as if 2 years of your life didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So that was that. That being said, when you write something, when we wrote Hysteria, which was the story of Def Leppard, we had been through so much agony in our careers and so many, you know, there's a term in Hollywood which is a green light, which is your movie's going to get made. And we had heard so many times your script has been green lighted and then it didn't get made, that when we wrote Hysteria and kept writing draft after draft and turning them in, and they said, it's great, it's terrific, it's wonderful. At a certain point, we said, and then they said, okay, so we're going to start shooting in 6 weeks. And we both said, so you mean you're making the movie? And they looked at us like, well, of course we're making the movie. Why wouldn't we? And we said, let me tell you 20 years worth of history why you wouldn't make the movie.
Yeah. There's even the first day of the shoot, we were going, is this really going to happen?
So I'm interested in the questions when you have questions, and I'll get to that as soon as I stop talking, which may not be very soon. I'm interested in what you all want to do, whether you write for the pleasure of writing, in which case I envied you because I never enjoyed writing. There's a very famous writer named Dorothy Parker back in the 30s in America who said, I love writing. The only thing I don't love about it is the paperwork. And then at another time, she was also quoted as saying, I love having written. And that to me was very accurate because whereas for Carolyn, and I'll let you speak for yourself, believe it or not, staring at a white wall for 12 hours and inventing characters was always a great pleasure. For me, it was like open up a vein and drip blood onto the keyboard, drop by drop by drop, until you're about to pass out, and then you go, okay, got to stop writing for today. Now you can talk for you if you want to.
Well, we come at it from very different approaches. I was an actress beforehand and was raised on that discipline of how to create a story, how to create a character. So it didn't take that much more to expand into how to create a story. Chris came from journalism, where you pound it out and you get it out there, and very different disciplines blended together. It works really well because I tend to like to research and study and develop more and more layers to a character. And Chris was very, very good at getting to that point where he ripped the screenplay out of my hands and said, it's done.
That's actually how we started writing together. Carolyn was an actress and she was very unhappy. Imagine an actress in Hollywood being unhappy. Well, she was. And she started writing and she showed me a script that she had written, and I looked at it and said, this is really, really good. If it were me, I'd do this and this and this and this. And like most wives of most pushy husbands, she listened to 3 or 4 suggestions and said, you're so smart. Sit down and do it yourself. And so that is actually how our partnership began. What I started to say, and I may not have finished, is I'm interested in whether you're doing it for the pleasure of writing or whether you think you might want to do it professionally. I can't speak to what it's like to write a book or magazine articles or something like that. I can only talk about screenplays, and I'm happy to do that whenever you guys decide you want to ask some questions. And if you don't have anything else to say.
Nothing of value. Go ahead. Let's let you.
Well, I've been going for 15 minutes with nothing of value. I can speak for hours and nothing of value.
Let these people lead us into whatever subjects are of interest to them, I would not be surprised if you ask, how do you get an agent? But let's go ahead. Why don't you guys, let's open it up. You ask what you think is the most important to you right now.
Yes, please.
May I?
Yes, of course.
You know, I am working with kids in a bilingual school. And I find it really difficult because in Ukrainian school, there is a kind of a subject like theater. And so you need, kids need to read something and then theatrically replay it. So, and it's really difficult to teach them dialects, like producing dialects, because the dialects that they can produce are usually like, hello, my grandmother. Hello, my grandson. It's like they sound very artificial. From what I observe, it's the most difficult moment to like put this words into your characters, like into your character, and
Sure.
that they could sound naturally. And you as screenwriters, you do it like through different layers. You need to express. So we need to understand what kind of a person is it, a good guy or a bad guy. So how do you do it? Are there any tips for dialogue making?
Okay, start out by writing it down. Most important. I don't care if it's stiff or awkward or not, just write it down. And then show it to people who have that dialect naturally and have them help train you as to how you can adjust your dialect so that it's right.
Marina, I just need to clarify something. There are two words in English which are very close together. Dialect, which is an
dialogue.
Dialogue. Okay, so she's talking about dialogue.
No, I'm about dialogues. Yeah, like when people talk to other.
How old are your kids?
10 years old.
Okay. They're not far away from that time in their lives where they had complete, their whole world was imagination. And as we get older, we lose that. And so as you get older, it's harder and harder to write dialogue, because if you're not lucky like Carolyn, who can live in her imagination, then you have to go back and try to access that. I think writing it down is a good idea, but I think there's a couple of other steps. I think you write it down and then you say it out loud and you see if it sounds like a person. Also, if you say you're writing a scene where somebody wants to buy a dog, and your first attempt at writing a piece of dialogue is, I want to buy a dog. Okay, that's fine. Now, sit down with somebody else and talk about wanting to be buy a dog, and record it. And so when you listen back to it, you hear the way how people approach that subject, but in a natural conversational tone, because the best dialogue is conversation. It's the way people speak with each other. It's the way they overlap dialogue. It's the way they interrupt one another. And if you can hear that on a tape, it can help you write it when you're trying to imagine the dialogue.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Oh God, nobody's asking questions. We're completely boring. Now you're going to hear what a writer thinks. They're not asking questions. We're completely boring. We have utterly failed at what we wanted to do. We must be just terrible human beings. I think I'll go out and kill myself. That's a writer. Hi, someone named iPhone is going to talk.
So yeah, Ludmila also. Ludmila, please. Yeah.
Okay, Ludmila. Hello.
Yeah. Hello. Hello.
That's the Golden Gate Bridge behind you. You must have done some traveling before you had this meeting.
Yeah, virtually I am.
Okay. Tell us what you'd like to ask.
So, I want to ask about some kind of general maybe point of view, and when you're writing, Do you use some strategies to create a hook of a gripping scene? Because, or maybe it's going to be spontaneously during creating your plot or creating your characters.
This is an argument that has been had among writers forever and ever and ever, and it's the argument of outline versus no outline. There are writers who sit down with a basic idea and no idea where they're going to go with it, and they just start writing, and as they say, they let their characters dictate where the story goes. That's never worked for us. We outline and outline and outline to the point where, if I remember one time we had a script which we were going to write, and a script is about 120 pages, but it's got a lot of white because there's dialogue and there's not very much black describing scenes. We had to write a 120-page script, and we wrote a 25-page single-spaced outline for that. Now, it's virtually impossible to crowd that all together. And so we had to strip it back and strip it back and strip it back. I've tried writing without an outline, and bad things happen to me. For other people, it'll work fine.
Well, I think that the outline or your general idea of where you want to go in a scene or a story, it's a good idea to have that. You write it down, but then what happens in the creative process is that things change. You suddenly, some character gives you a voice that you hadn't thought was possible. And it's like, oh, well, let's go with that. And I think it's a combination of getting a general idea of where you want to go and then letting your characters talk to you, because they'll eventually tell you where to go.
That is the great mystery of writing. Both Carolyn and I have had this happen, and I think most writers have, where you're writing and you're typing. I type this way, she types that way. And suddenly you write a piece of dialogue or something that a character says, and you go, where did that come from? I didn't think of that. I didn't intend that. And then that's when writers say, pardon me, the character is telling me where the story should go. So the long answer, which I tend to give, the long answer to what you're asking, or the short answer to what you're asking, is it's different for every person, but I feel untethered, unanchored if I don't have some kind of outline to work from. And then if something changes, something changes. Forgive me. Pardon me. Okay. Anybody else? Sure. You're welcome. Anybody else?
May I?
Yeah.
You may indeed. Oh, yeah. If nobody else is hello. I can't. Your name is in Cyrillic, so I can't read it.
Elena.
Elia? Okay.
Elena.
Elia.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know I'm butchering it. I'm sorry. Typical American.
I would like to know, are there situations when the script goes wrong, or maybe the characters behave, I don't know, inappropriately? What do you do with these situations? What do you do with these characters? Can you change the starting idea, or what should do the author with this odd thing?
This is why, you know the term AI, artificial intelligence? Okay. This is why AI will hit a wall when it comes to writing scripts, because it's not human. It can't intuit. It can't write a line of dialogue and go, wait a minute, that character's going in a completely different direction. Where does it come from? Space. I don't know where it comes from. I was listening to a Beethoven piece the other day, and I was thinking to myself, I didn't say this to you, but I was thinking, he didn't write that. That came to him from somewhere else, and it came through his fingers somehow. And I am of the belief that creative people are creative and successful to the degree that they can tap into that universe that none of us can see or touch, and become conduits for it. So that when a character does something or says something you didn't expect him or her to, it's somebody on the other side going, hey, wake up, you're wrong, it's got to go this other way. And if you're smart, you listen.
Yep. Yep.
Wonderful dialogue. Yep, yep. Something in 25 years of writing together I never heard. Anyway, who's next?
There was
Hello.
yeah.
Hello, Ella.
Yeah,
Hey, Ella.
yeah. Hello. I've got a question.
Sure.
Can you bring an example of a script that went smoothly without a hitch? Did you have such an experience?
Let me answer your question with another question. For those of you who have children, have you ever raised a child who never gave you a single moment of problems? It's no. If you're writing a script, if Carolyn and I, for example, if she was writing one day and she came out to me after finishing writing and went, I don't believe it. It was so easy today. It just flowed. That happened maybe twice.
No, actually, I have had days that it just went. But then you look at it the next day and you go, oh, maybe I should rewrite a little bit of
It's
this.
a little bit like a story I remember being told of someone who had taken a mind-altering substance and gone to sleep and woke up in the middle of the night realizing he had thought of the secret of the universe, and he managed to get a piece of paper and a pad and he wrote it down. And in the morning he woke up and he was so excited to grab this thing, and he looked at it, and in the middle of the night he had written, "It's very warm in here." So you have to be distrustful of everything that you write, because knowing as good as you think it is today, tomorrow you may look at it and say, not so good. We were lucky in our careers where we worked with a number of producers, people who controlled the whole project, who were creative. And they would say that the best notes we ever got were from one particular producer who would say, I read what you wrote. It's great. It's really terrific. I maybe tweak this one little thing. And then that became, you unravel the whole fabric that way. But he did it nicely. There were others who didn't do it so nicely. The fact of the matter is, we don't know where it comes from. And sometimes it comes and it's brilliant and it stays brilliant. There are scenes in Class Action, the movie we wrote with Gene Hackman, where on the once every 10 years occasion where we watch it again, we'll see something and Carolyn will comment, that scene never changed from the first time we wrote it to being up on the screen through 25 drafts. Those are very, very rare.
Yeah. And the scene he's referring to was a one where we wrote it, we went, oh, this is going in an entirely different direction than we thought.
Let me tell you how different a direction it was. It was very early in the script. We had a character whose father was problematic in her life, and he died maybe 10 pages into the script. And we wrote this scene on page 8 or whatever it was, and we finished and we looked at each other and said, he can't die.
No.
He's too important. He's got to stay alive for the rest of the script, because look at this other relationship that we can develop.
So and so then we called the producers and said, we have news for you. We can't kill this guy. And they said, yeah, you have to kill him. That's what we want. And we went, okay. And we killed him. We had it in the draft, and they went, you know what? Maybe he could stay for a third more of the script. And then it grew to, 70% of the script. And then he became Gene Hackman. And that's the way it is.
You know the story of the camel in the tent? If I love this story, and maybe you can use it in your own lives. There's an Arab family that has a camel, and there's a terrible windstorm one night, and the camel puts his nose in under the tent, and the father says, get him out of here. And the daughter says, no, it's just his nose. He'll be fine. He lets it go. About 15 minutes later, the camel's head is in the tent. And the daughter says, leave him alone. He'll be fine. That's as far as he'll go. Cut to the end of the story. The camel's in the tent and the people are outside. So things happen gradually. The problem is, we could just as well have been completely wrong about that scene as we were completely right. And you never know. And that's the utterly maddening thing about being a writer. You never know. I see things that we wrote up on television now, and I go, I'm still not sure that's the right way to do it. So, who's next?
Yeah, just a comment.
Yes.
And maybe a question which is related to what you have just said.
Mhm.
There is always room for perfection. Yeah.
Mm.
And do you know when to stop?
He does.
The perfect question. The perfect question. I have that feeling when I look at painters and I go, how do you know the painting is finished? You could have stopped 3 strokes ago and it would have been fine with me. The answer is you don't know. You never know. There's nothing certain in any of this, but it reaches a point where you go, more often than not, the end of the script is one of you standing up and screaming at the other, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it anymore. And Carolyn was always the best at starting things, and I was the best at finishing things. And I would say, we're done. Nope, I got to do one more rewrite. It'll only take 10 minutes. If any of your spouses has ever said to you something about it'll only take 10 minutes, it's a lie.
Yeah.
It's a lie.
Now, I will say that there are points where, when you're writing, you'll get to the end of a scene and say, I can't do it any better than this. Maybe tomorrow I'll look at that and go, oh boy, I could change this and that and the other. But if you keep getting to the end, if you review it, I review every day what I've written. If every day you get to a particular place and you go, no, I can't do better than that, let's go on. That says a lot. You've gotten it.
It says a lot positively and negatively, because if you look at a scene like that and you go, that scene is perfect, then you look at the other 119 pages of the script and you go, why can't I make those as good as this scene is? And the answer is, on rare occasions you can. But more than that, you said somebody used the word perfection. And if any of you ever think you're on the way to perfection, on the way is fine. Getting there is not possible. And so I always wanted to put it up on the wall. Do not make the perfect the enemy of the good.
Yeah, get it down, write it, get it down, and move on. That's really critical.
Yeah. And there are times when you're so blind to what you've written. We wrote a scene very early on in Class Action. Do you know what I'm going to say?
Yeah, I know.
We wrote a scene very early on in Class Action where there was a main character who was in a wheelchair. He had lost both of his legs in a car crash. And we had him being interviewed by an attorney. And at a certain point, he got so angry and so frustrated that we wrote in the script, he stands up and storms out of the office. Now, as I say it now, a few of you may have realized there's a problem there. I can tell you with certainty, 4 years, 25 drafts, innumerable eyes on this script. Until the day of shooting, nobody realized the man could not stand up because he didn't have legs. And so we had to rewrite the scene, and we're sitting there rewriting going, how did nobody ever see this? But they didn't. Next, hello.
Olena, please. Yeah, and Marina will be next. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. I study that with students. I teach interpretation of the literary text, and usually we speak about omniscient authors or authors that stay aloof. What kind of author are you?
What kind of author am I?
Yeah.
Aloof is good. I mean, if I'm around other people, I put on a really good act, and then I go, God, I don't want to do that anymore, and I hide in my bedroom under the covers.
Yeah, I think most writers are shy introverts. It's just the nature of the beast. And that's just the norm. So, there are people who really get charged up in a room of other writers or whatever. Those are usually writing comedies, sitcoms. It's a different talent, but most writers, they're shy. They're just shy. They're sitting on the sidelines watching everybody and going, I wonder if, or I wonder why. And that's how they find stories.
In fact,
I think that most writers, when they get ideas, it's because they were slugging along, doing their thing, da 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 da, and then something that they hear or see, they get it a little wrong. It gets crooked. It's not really what's happening, but it is an idea that's coming to them and saying, okay, well, let's switch this around. Let's go with the crooked version.
yeah.
And that's where you get your creativity.
One of the things that you have to understand is, and this is certainly not my idea, psychotherapists have known this for a long time, that the line between genius and creativity is almost non-existent. And so that's why there are so many eccentric writers, because their minds are built in such a way that they feel more comfortable living in their imagination than they do living with other people. And so if you see somebody who's flamboyant and loud and gets along great with other people and always needs to be surrounded by people, that's either not a very good writer, or it's somebody who's magically been able to integrate those parts of his or her personality.
We haven't.
Yeah, Carolyn is much more outgoing than I am. And even she will come out of a party after a couple of hours and go, I never want to see another human being again.
I just get exhausted. There are people who are introverts and there are people who are extroverts.
You play being an extrovert really well.
I can do it for about 2 hours and then I'm exhausted. And I have to go curl up in my bed and take a nap.
I, on the other hand, wake up in the morning and my first thought is, I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to encounter another human being. I just want to be by myself. Which is why I'm such a successfully integrated, mature human being.
He doesn't go to the party.
I don't. I know, there's only two things that can happen. It's going to be horrible or it's going to be worse. And so I'm just not a party person. Another question?
Okay, Marina, please.
Actually, I have a few questions.
Okay, good.
The first one, what was your hardest script?
What was the what?
Hardest.
Hardest.
Hardest script. Oh,
well, every single one of them?
Well, there was one script that did not get made for good reason. That the producer had a very rigid idea of what he wanted. And we realized as we were writing it that it was not going to work. And we told him this, and he insisted that we do it his way. And that just turned into the only time in my life I have had writer's block. I could not write that script. It was just, I knew it was wrong. I couldn't do it. I put words down that were crap, excuse my language. But I did what he said, and it turned into this mess.
And the terrible number 1,462 of the terrible things about being a screenwriter for money is that when it's all over, that producer went out and told everyone that we'd done a crappy script, and that's why it didn't get made. Wasn't his fault. It was our fault. It's always the writer's fault, because as I said before, everybody knows how to use words, and so everybody knows how to do your job better than you do. And that's incredibly frustrating. And I will admit to having been in therapy at one point, and I was sitting with a therapist who specialized in treating screenwriters. and he had a line out the door waiting to get an appointment with him. But I said to him one day, it's just so frustrating to take these notes and then be blamed, and they're wrong, but you have to incorporate them, and then being blamed for the script being bad. He said, I have a writer client who was sitting right where you are about an hour ago saying the same thing, and he makes $3 million a script. So it doesn't change. It doesn't matter. It doesn't, it's, you know, it's like they say about acting. If you can do anything else in the world, unless you're really, really committed to wanting to do this, find another way to do it, because it, other than acting, which I think is worse, it is the most soul-crushing way to do things. And if you're writing for your own pleasure, God be with you. That's just great, because the minute you start showing it to other people, they start chipping away at your confidence in what you did. But that's a trap too, because when you write something and you're really proud of it, you want to show it to somebody else, and you show it to somebody else, and they say, as I did with her, I'd change this and this and this, and you get up on your high horse and go, how dare you? Who do you think you're talking to here? I created that. It's madness. It's just crazy. But it also has its incredible highs.
Yeah.
You had more questions?
Yes, I have. So the second question, how did you realize that you want to be a screenwriter?
Carolyn realized she wanted to do
Myself?
just a headline. Carolyn realized she wanted to do anything else in the world but acting. And that's why she started writing.
My training, my education had all been in theater. And so it was a very logical step to go from acting, which is really hard, and to being a writer, which is so much nicer because you're mainly alone in your little room, looking at a blank wall and going, what could I do next? So that was really easy for me.
I don't know if any of you has ever been an actor, but at least when you're a writer and you turn in a script and they say, no, thanks, you're saying, oh, that's something I created. That's my child. It's out there. It's been rejected. When you're an actor, they're rejecting every single thing about you as a human being. So I realize that we've gone way away from your question. So let me get back to your question. I decided I wanted to be a writer because I was on the radio in Los Angeles, and I was tired of being on the radio, and she showed me a script. And I thought, what an easy way to make a living. And I learned that it was not quite that way. Anyway, Carolyn was called to it as a calling. I did it as a way to make a living. And maybe that helped us as a writing team. Anyway, you said you had a number of questions?
Yes.
Okay.
So the next question, from where do you take your inspiration?
Up there. or down there.
Well,
I said, for example,
hearing things crooked.
Hold on one second. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
So, for example, you have a deal, yes, from some producer, and he says you that you need to write some ideas, and what is next?
Divine inspiration. And I'm not a religious person, so figure out whatever word you want to use instead of divine. Ideas come, every writer, I think, at one time or another has felt this way, that every single idea in the world is floating around up there in the atmosphere. And every once in a while, your antenna happens to be pointed in the right direction at the right time, and it comes to you. The ideas that and you can obviously speak for yourself, but the ideas that I've had as a writer have surprised me and have come fully formed into my head. That's why I think about somebody like Beethoven, getting an idea to come fully formed into his head and just being the secretary. I felt like that was me quite a lot.
Well, on a practical level, if it's my idea, as I said before, it's usually something I've heard crooked. That I go, oh, well, that's an interesting thing to explore. If a producer comes to us and says, hey, I've got this great idea, Are you interested in writing about whatever? Then it's a question of, are you interested? If it's something that is absolutely disgusting to you, it's best to say, thank you very much, but we're not the right writers. If it is something that might be worth exploring, yeah, then you start playing around with the idea, preferably with the producer, because if they're invested in the idea, it's more likely to get from the start to the end. But it's really playing. It's trying things out, and most of the time they don't work, but then you kind of hit the groove, and it just feels right.
Much more often, they will come to you with an idea and then make a deal to pay for your services, rather than the other way around. But I do remember that when we made Class Action, and this is a story you'll hear from every writer, when we made Class Action, it was a story of a father and daughter, both of whom were lawyers, who had a lot of problems with one another and went up against each other in court. And shortly after it came out, we had a producer call us and said, I got a great idea and you'd be perfect to write it. And I said, okay, what? He said, a father and child who are both attorneys and they go up against each other in court. I said, we just wrote that movie. And he said, no, this child is a son, not a daughter. This is the level of intelligence you're dealing with in some of these people. And I'm proud to say we both had the courage to say no to that. But I don't know where our ideas come from. They're just out there. You have another question?
The last one. And how much time do you need to write one script?
Well, here's the first draft, which is always the joyous one. It depends on how much research you have to do. I love research. The studio doesn't like the amount of research I do, so they kind of cut me off after about a month. So then you start writing the story, and generally you've been taking notes about, oh, this will be a good scene, this will be a good scene. So you start stringing it together, and generally that'll take, 1 to 2 months. And then you hand it in and see what they say. And so generally about 3 months for a first draft. After that, it all depends on the reaction you get from the producers in the studio. They could say, this is great, just change this one little thing. That rarely happens, but it does. Or they could say, well, that was a good idea, but now that's made us think of another way to, and they go off and you're doing another first draft.
Yeah, but Carolyn said something that I think was inadvertently funny, which is, they say, we just want to change this one little thing. Oftentimes that one little thing is like, I assume most people have seen Casablanca, and they say, okay, the script is perfect, but what if we make Rick a gorilla? and they see it as a really tiny little change, and you go, do you know what you've done? And they don't, because they're no good at what you are very, very good at.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, there's 2 different kinds of scripts. There's the script in your own head, and I was going to say about 3 months for that. And then you start getting notes from people. And as I say, with the feature film that we wrote with Gene Hackman, that took 4 years and 25 drafts. So that's how long that script took.
Actually, I remember it as 5 years, but who's quibbling?
You are.
Oh, yeah.
Next.
I have one more question.
Oh, wait, I'm a writer who's been lied to. I don't think there's another person on the face of the earth who
Wait a
can
minute,
say
I
that.
want to say something. If you're writing on your own without producers and agents calling and saying, when's it going to be ready? When's it going to be ready? You could spend 3 years writing the first draft.
You could spend 3 years writing this script.
Oh, that's interesting. It helps a lot when you've got a bunch of people who want the script.
I've always had the vision of Carolyn in this, like going to Disneyland and saying, I'm going to go on the Matterhorn ride and that's all, and then I'm going to leave. And she walks in and goes, ooh, that's interesting. Ooh, I could do that. That's fun. And days later, she's still in the park. Anyway, you had a last question.
Okay, so what was your best script? How do
Oh,
you think?
wow.
Well,
What's your favorite child?
class action, I'm very proud
I
of.
just have one.
Yeah. I have a couple of scripts that I loved that never got beyond the point of the studio reading it. Thank you very much. No, thank you. Class action, we're very, very proud of because we worked so hard on it. It became a good movie. Every script is your favorite. No, I shouldn't say that. Many scripts are your favorite while you're writing them. Some you're just doing for the money. But I'll go with class action. That's fine.
Yeah. There were some that were just gut-wrenching losses when they didn't get made. We had one that we wrote that was about the scandal of the Olympics in Salt Lake City and how they had bribed everybody to get the Olympics there. And we had a wonderful time writing it. We got to know a great number of Mormons, and it was just a joy to write this script because there was so much hypocrisy in it. And
the studio unusually loved it. They called us in for a meeting. They were talking about, here are the pre-production dates. Here is when we're going to shoot it. And we're sitting there going, what's going to go wrong? What's going to go wrong? What went wrong is that the next day, the very next day was 9/11. And so everything went away.
changed. The entire orientation of the people in Hollywood, which it just changed. It was now, okay, we need to do escapist stuff. We cannot do anything heavy. We need to just emotionally mellow out. And so that's what their goal was. And a story about scandal in the Salt Lake Olympics just wasn't on the menu.
Yeah. Do you have another final question? she's laughing. Oh, okay. I think we may have gotten to the end of her questions. Not to say that you were completely monopolizing everyone's time here, but anyway, does anybody else have a question?
We have a question from our chat. Larissa is asking, do you believe that your characters can exist somewhere in the universe? Do you feel like responsible for their destiny, preparing them a problem in your script?
Nobody told me there'd be philosophy questions in this. I'm not prepared. I always thought that it was important to know what happened to your characters the day after the movie ended. And so there is something to that. When we wrote Class Action and father-daughter up against each other, there's a resolution to the court situation. There's a resolution of sorts to their family situation. We thought the next day they would go into partnership with each other. We'd have a 10-year run as a TV series and be living on our own island right now. That didn't happen, obviously. But it's a really, I have to admit, it's not a question I've pondered a lot. And that's interesting to me. I'm going to think about that because you do have a responsibility to those characters. There have been, are you familiar with an old American show called The Twilight Zone?
Yes.
Kind of science fiction fantasy. And there was an episode of that in which a writer had his character come to life and confront him in his office and talk about why he was doing certain things and what he was going to do in the future. And that's real. I mean, you live with these people for so long that if one popped up in your office, you'd be momentarily surprised, but then you'd involve yourself in a dialogue with them. So yeah, I think there is a responsibility on the part of the writer to make the character logical when you want it to be logical and not logical when you want it not to be logical. But you always have to understand. It's like I started to say about villains. No villain ever considers him or herself a villain. They always think they're doing something in the furtherance of a positive of some sort. And that's why you can't write a cardboard villain that's just bad. You've got to say, I understand. So, you know, apart from the fact that most villains die at the end of the movie, if you went on with it or go to jail, you went on with a villain, it would be kind of interesting to see what happened. Yeah, I mean, applause to whoever asked that question, because that's a very, very interesting question.
I don't know. I've fantasized so much about my characters. I figured out the children that they have and what their names are going to be by 20 years down the line. So I'm always thinking of them. They're my babies, which is one of the hardest things about writing a script, because they do become your babies.
And you give them to someone who says, you know, what if we put the kid's nose on the side of his head? What if we put his ears on his stomach? I mean, it's like, you're fooling with my child here.
Yeah.
But the answer is, whether it's stated or not, we're paying you a lot of money for your child, so we get to do what we want to.
Yep.
Anyone else?
May I? You know,
You've gathered a lot of shy people here today, Marina.
they may write in the chat. If they...
Okay, what is your question?
My question is that we started with the writer who gave us a playlist. Her name is Natalie C. And she kept talking about there's two things that drive your character, the fears and the desires.
Yes.
Yeah? So do you use the same scheme?
Oh, yeah.
I think every writer does, but you're better at character than I am. So.
Well, yeah, absolutely. You know, people's fear, their goals, their vision of what should come next. That's absolutely to be true to the character. You need to know that and to fantasize around all of the possibilities. And spend too much money and not money, but too much time until your husband rips away the script and says, that's enough.
But the husband who rips that stuff away also understands that every character in a movie is an iceberg. You see this much of them, and there's what generally referred to as a backstory that never gets on the screen, but you understand what you built for that character. And actors will do the same thing. They'll see a character in a script and they'll build a whole backstory, which is probably different from the backstory that you created. But your characters have to be motivated by a need, a desire, a fear, something of the elemental emotions that we all deal with, so that partly because you create a rounded character that way, but also partly because the audience will sit there and say, I know that guy, I know that woman, or I am that woman. I feel that way. That's ideally what you want from an audience.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
I've got another question, may I?
I don't know, Ella. May she? Ask Marina if it's all right with her.
Okay.
Yes, she says, go ahead.
So you mentioned that villain usually dies at the end, yeah? So the story becomes final, yeah? Have you ever written a script with an open end? Like in the book, you put 3 dots and leave it for the reader to infer, or the viewer to infer what's going on.
You're about to see us punch one another, because no, you don't get to speak first. There is a concept in writing called The Lady and the Tiger. Do any of you know that fairy tale? It doesn't matter if you do or don't. The Lady and the Tiger has a character at the end of the story who has to choose between 2 doors.
3.
2 doors.
Yeah, no, 2.
You can add your door. But the 2 doors are the lady and the tiger.
Oh, yes, you're right.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so it's a matter of, do I open this door or do I open that door? And what am I going to get, the lady or the tiger? And the story ends without an answer. I love endings like that.
I hate them. I think that it's your job as a writer is to give people some kind of conclusion.
I think your job as a writer is to get people to ask questions and to go out for a drink afterwards and say, well, what would you have done? Well, what would I have done? Well, what would you have done?
You're wrong.
One of the things you see here is that a writing partnership is always involves conflict, and hopefully you keep it caring and loving, and mostly we did. Next.
Olena, please. Yeah.
I can add, but my students know this story very well because I use this story all the time. And mostly it's very difficult. Not every reader is ready to read such stories as Lady the Tiger. Not
Olena, will you
yeah.
please tell her it's 2 doors and not 3?
It's okay.
Yes,
it's I was wrong, and I corrected myself. I said he was right.
I just wanted to rub it in. Go ahead.
The reader should be very attentive and seeking for these keys that are hidden in the story that can prompt the very ending. And we have very huge and very tremendous discussions, because usually my class is split into 2 and they start fighting. Yes, and usually, yeah, the students, I have mostly girls, and they said, she hinted him to choose the tiger. She wants to kill him, and that's all. Yeah, and that's the reason. But the point is, the reader should be very attentive, seeking these clues, because usually author tries to hint, yes, what the ending is, but it's very difficult somehow. And not every reader. If it is a short story, it's okay. But if the story is somehow bigger, is somehow troublesome, and the students or readers don't like it. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm jealous of you for teaching. You said 10-year-olds primarily? Is that what you said about the age of your students? That they're 10 years old?
No, 20 years old is usually bachelor's degree. Yeah.
They're adults. Oh, someone else said 10 years old. Let me set aside the person going for the bachelor's degree for a second and just say that I envy those of you who are teaching about 10-year-olds, because all you have to say to them is, remember when you were 4 or 5. Think about the things you imagined. Think about the worlds that you lived in. Think about how it was when you only had to live in your imagination and not have adults tell you that's not the way it is. Okay.
People, I have to go. I've got another meeting I've got to get to, but go ahead. He can talk on forever. So good luck for all of you guys, and keep writing. Just put it down on paper. Put it down on paper. That's the important thing.
Yeah. And you should be aware that, as Carolyn said, the greatest pleasure you have in the first draft, when only you are the one judging it. But by the same token, first drafts are almost always terrible. You look at them the next day and you go, how did I think that was a good idea? And that's when you start the rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. But if those of you who, I just want to say one more time, those of you who are teachers, I think are incredibly fortunate, particularly with young people, because they're much closer to their imaginations than we are. It's like learning a foreign language. At my age, I strongly doubt I could learn a foreign language. And I look at all of you, and I'm so jealous of the fact that you speak at least 2 languages. It's just, it's incredible to me. One of the many things I dislike about the typical American is that we will listen to someone kind of haltingly speak English, and many Americans will say, isn't that ridiculous? Isn't that funny how that person talks? And the answer is, how many languages do you know? How many languages are you trying to speak? So please take my compliments to every single one of you that knows a second language. It's brilliant. You should be very proud of yourselves. Anybody else?
Yes, one more question, and I promise it's the last one. Yeah?
That's fine.
So
I can sit here all day.
Larissa, is asking, do you come back to your scripts in sorts years after to say it should have finished another way?
It's hard. It's hard to go back and read them, and it's hard to go back and watch the movies that were made of them. And I'm certainly not the first person to say this, because all you can think of is, that's not bad, but it could have been better. Oh, this is awful. How did I ever think that was the right line to write there? So I find myself being hypercritical of stuff that I read years later. Sometimes I'll read things and go, gee, I didn't realize that's actually pretty good. But more often than not, it's cringing at the fact that you feel like you should have done it better, which is why if you write something and you put it away and you take it out, it will scream at you, I need to be rewritten. Look, you need to polish this, you need to straighten this, you need to do this and this and this. And that will go on for the rest of your life. It will, on your deathbed, if they show you something you've written, you're going to come up with ideas of how to do it differently, but you don't have the time to do them. Anyone else? Boy, you got a lot of shy people in your group.
No, yeah.
I can.
Ella.
Oh, hi, Ella. You see, Ella's a repeat performer, so we're going to accept her. Go ahead.
I wonder how you are feeling before submitting your script to the director or producer. Well, do you feel nervous? Do you feel anticipation or whatever? Yeah.
Somebody's got a phone call. If you've ever walked into a room full of cobras, then you know what that feels like. It's like you think Carolyn makes a joke about how I'm the one to finish things. I am the one to finish things, but that doesn't mean I'm not afraid that they're not finished. And so when you turn it in, it's agony, waiting. It's like a father waiting outside the delivery room, waiting for his baby to be born. It's like, and then we were lucky because we worked at a time when a producer would call you after a couple, 3 days and say, I read it, it's this good, it's that good, I didn't like it, I don't like it, whatever. Now I understand in Hollywood, they just don't call you. You turn in the script and days and weeks and months will go by, and eventually you conclude, oh, okay, I guess they didn't like it. But that just prolongs the agony. There is a degree of confidence. There is a degree of, this is the best I can do. But then you start thinking to yourself, yeah, it's the best you could do, but whoever told you you had talent? You know, you're no good at this. It's a piece of crap that you've written. And yeah, you lie awake at night, and those are the louder voices. You know, you're thinking, oh, I did okay, I did. And this booming loudspeaker comes on and says, you're a fraud, you're a phony, you're worthless. Nothing you just did is any good. Or maybe that's just me, I don't know. But you're never, I think most people are never 100% confident of what they do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, I've got one question. May I ask it?
Well, I don't know. You said you're sorry, so you know, you could apologize.
Okay.
I'll accept your apology. Yeah. What would you like to ask?
I would like to ask you about criticism. How do you feel about it? Does it still hurt you, or maybe you have become resistant to it? I mean, this is your creation. Do you get angry when it needs to be changed according to someone else's will? What do you feel?
You know, how do you feel if you're going out on a date and someone comes to your door and says, you look horrible, you want to go change and maybe take a shower and put on a little perfume or something? I don't respond well to criticism. It is very, very hard. This is the one of the core issues about being a writer. You pour every single bit of yourself into creating the best possible thing you can, and then someone else reads it and says, this is not good. And it's like, I invested so much of myself. How can you say it's not good? Well, because everybody's got an opinion. I never got used to being criticized. That's why the best people, and if you ever read somebody else's stuff and they ask you for a response, I would strongly suggest you adopt the following position, which is, you'll forgive my language, but it's called a shit sandwich. And a shit sandwich is piece of bread. This is really good. There's some fabulous stuff in here. I really like it. Shit, but I would change this and this and this. Piece of bread on top. But generally speaking, it's really good. That makes it so much easier. You're rolling your eyes. Why are you rolling your eyes? It makes it so much easier to accept.
I can understand your feelings.
It makes it so much easier to feel like they're on your side. You know, they saw something of the value I put in this. I'll take any note they want. Well, I won't take any note they want, but we had one producer in particular who was great at that. And it made you feel nourished. It made you feel appreciated. It made you feel as though somebody understood the amount of labor that you put into this. And they understood also that in a simple human interchange, there can be negativity, or there can be negativity expressed in a diplomatic way that makes you both feel like you did a good job. And unfortunately, most people aren't like that. Certainly most people in the entertainment business aren't like that. Your question, I think, was about criticism. I hate it. I think it's awful. You know, it's terrible. It's, what right do you have? You're stupid. Why did I even get involved with you in the first place? You know, it's like, yes, you do feel those things. And there are times, I mean, I remember getting a call about a script we had turned in, and we had gone through all that period of, oh my God, is it good, is bad, good and bad. Finally, the executive called, hello, you rock. Oh, thank you very, very much. Okay, go ahead and say whatever you want to now. I'm cool. So anyhow, criticism is disgusting, but it's the price of doing business.
Thank you. And if you don't mind, one more thing.
You can ask 5 more things.
One, just one.
No.
Do you have to include hidden advertisement in your scripts sometimes?
Advertisement?
Hidden advertisement, maybe commercial, maybe political. And if yes, how do you feel about this? And how do you deal with this? How to do it not to interfere in your personal space? How to save yourself?
That is virtually never something that the writer has anything to do with. That's something, it's called product placement. And it exists, it certainly exists, but the writer has nothing to do with it. That's done way, way, way down the line by the studio and the producers who make deals once the movie is about to be shot about, oh, he holds up a can of Coke at this point. Do I feel bad about it? No, not particularly. I mean, it can get ridiculous, you know, if you've got 20 products being placed in a movie. Yeah, that's kind of foolish, but it doesn't bother me. And the thing you should most understand is it has nothing to do with me as a writer. I have never placed a product in a script. I've never been asked to place a product in a script. It's always somebody else does that.
Thank you very much. Oh,
you're welcome very much. Anybody else?
Well, I've got another question.
God, it's the repeat offender. Yes. Yes,
well, if somebody else is willing to, I can keep silent.
No, Ellen and I are going out for coffee afterwards. We're going to talk about
okay, it's
Go
a
ahead.
deal. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Are you usually invited to the site, to the shooting when the film is being shot? Yeah,
Most
being
most
produced.
mostly not.
Mhm.
We have had occurrences where we have forced ourselves onto the set and nobody's, been particularly bothered that we were there, but nobody really took advantage of our being there otherwise. I thought you were going to ask a slightly different question, which I have a story for, actually. The same guy who said nobody knows anything. He wrote All the President's Men, which some of you may have seen. It's a very famous movie. And at the premiere, he went to the door and was going to go into the premiere, and the guard at the door said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm the writer." And he said, "You're not on the list." "But I wrote the movie." "Sorry, can't come in." Could not go to the premiere of his own movie. There's a man with 2 Academy Awards. Couldn't go to the premiere of his own movie because he was the joke in Hollywood is, did you hear about the actress who was so stupid she slept with the writer? That pretty much sums up where we are in the pecking order. Anybody else? Yes, Olena.
Yeah, I'm interested about the feeling. Did you feel the one morning when you woke up and you woke up famous? Do you remember the moment?
I was never famous. I will give you that. But I remember going to the premiere of one of our movies, and they actually did let us in the theater. And somebody, to this day, I don't know who they were. They said, "You wrote this movie." "Yes, I did, but who are you?" "Oh, I just want your autograph." Oh my God. I had to autograph something? Writers are not famous. If you think of your favorite movies ever, and I ask you, even people like you who are writers, if I say, "Who wrote that?" chances are you won't know. I don't know. In 99% of the cases, I can't tell you who the writer was. So you don't do it for the fame. You do it for the ridiculously high amounts of money and the great personal character satisfaction when everybody loves you because you're so talented. I wish I knew what it was like to be famous. I think of somebody, I say I would like to be famous because everybody says that. But I've worked with actors and walked down the street with them, and famous actors, and seen what people's reaction is. And the idea of having to deal with that every day for the rest of my life put a gun to my head. I would never, ever, ever want to be that recognizable. I knew actors who would only go out if they were in disguise. No, I'm way too introverted for that. So
Thank you.
I've never been famous, and I guess on balance, I'm happy with that. Anybody else?
Okay, looks like
Okay.
we're out of questions. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Because I'll go on forever, but this has been great fun. You told me 30 or 40 minutes, and we've gone like twice that amount, and I'm very, very happy. I hope I haven't bored you too much.
No, you didn't. Thank you so much.
You're
Of
welcome.
course, talking to a real Hollywood screenwriter was was a real, again, like repetition. So it was a real pleasure of
It was absolutely my pleasure, and people say that all the time, and it's not true, but it was absolutely my pleasure. So much so that if any of you has other questions, Marina has my email. Send them to me. I will be happy to answer anything else that you want to ask.
Yes, I will send the email to the colleagues because they might like to invite you, like Marina did, for their students.
Absolutely. And if any of you ever have the opportunity to come to the United States, I will be happy to show you around.
Yeah, so if you are going to Portland, know that you have a
I'll even go to, I'll go to Los Angeles. I travel, you know, I'll make do for you. Anyway, thank you so much for
Thank
having
you
me.
so much, Chris, and thank you so much, everyone. And I will share Chris's contacts so that you could contact him and Carolyn and invite them here. So thank you and
Thanks.
bye-bye. Have a
Bye.
safe night
Bye.
here without explosions here. Bye-bye.